and good evening. Welcome to Consider This, the show where we want you to consider, then reconsider the news of the day. I'm Melisa Idris.
And I'm Sharaad. Kuttan.
And joining us in the studio is our favorite Ibrahim Sani, host of Notepad with Ibrahim Sani.
Yeah, great. Thanks for having me.
Okay, so we're going to do a bit of a news roundup this week because it's been a really heavy news week. We saw the end of this session of Parliament. Also, lots of things happening in politics and around the world. So I think, kick it off with IPCMC, which is the Independent Police Complaints and Misconduct Commission Bill, better known as IPCMC Bill. Now, the government decided this week to defer the second and third reading of the IPCMC Bill to the next Dewan Rakyat meeting. What this would have done was it would have created an independent oversight body to investigate and handle all disciplinary action on police misconduct. It was seen to be such a disappointing move on the part of the government to delay this. What did you think, Sharaad?
Yeah, well, we in fact had on the show Melisa Sani from Lawyers for Liberty. Melissa, if you remember, I mean, much of the conversation had to do with a long history, the very long history of the development of this idea, going back to the time of Abdullah Ahmad Badawi, the Prime Minister then, who instituted a Royal Commission of inquiry into the police force, looking at all kinds of dimensions of the police force, including a question of an oversight mechanism. There was resistance then to suggestions made by the Royal Commission, and today we see the same kind of pushback coming from the police force. Essentially, I think the message that Melisa gave us was, in no country have the police force...
Sasidara, not Idris, yes.
Yes, not this Melisa, but the other Melisa, agreeing, saying that, no country did the police actually say they wanted it, but there was political will to push it through, and those countries are much better for it.
Until there isn't, right? Because I spoke to a lot of our colleagues who actually went to the Parliament. When they were covering the Parliament throughout the week of last week as well as this week, they say that they have quoted some MPs saying that the police constituents are now telling their MPs that they don't want this and they will retaliate. So imagine we have 222 MPs. Each and every single one of them have a sizable amount of police community and voters inside it. So what we're looking at is actually even Pakatan MPs, not just the opposition, but Pakatan MPs facing resistance to get this bill through.
So this comes back to what Sharaad said. Is there political will to kind of galvanize this, or is Pakatan Harapan afraid of making these tough decisions? Now, when we spoke to Melisa Sani and Sharaad, Director of Lawyers for Liberty, earlier this week, one of the key things I thought was particularly interesting was all this, all the conversations around the IPCMC bill and the deferment of it had put the law minister front and center, right, Dato' Liew Wiew Keong. But actually what Melisa pointed out was, in fact, we should be asking these questions of the Home Ministry. Actually, here's a clip from Melisa.
Secondly, although the law minister has taken it upon himself to table the bill, but essentially this is a Home Ministry bill because the police force is actually under the Home Ministry. So the only person who can withdraw the bill is actually the Home Minister. And I think there's so much spotlight on the law minister because he's the public face of this, but not enough is being shown on the Home Minister,
Muhyiddin
Yassin, who has to answer why did he, despite the cabinet green light to table this, why did he pull back this bill?
Okay, so does this bill require bipartisan support, as we had like with the Undi 18 situation?
It requires a simple majority. Okay. So it's just a matter of commitment from the Pakatan Harapan government, and they have the numbers. But unfortunately, as I said, it's the Home Ministry that is, the stumbling block to this. And I think they need to answer why did they pull the plug on this at the 11th hour.
And that was Melisa Sani, the Director of Lawyers for Liberty. And I think it's really fair that we should be actually posing these questions to the Home Ministry. We should not let the Home Ministry get off the hook in answering why they decided to defer the IPCMC bill. Also, what is the backstory? Why all of a sudden, it was scheduled to be tabled and debated, then what happened, right?
There is a discord amongst the Pakatan MPs, as simple as that. When you have over 120 MPs on your side and nearly half of them, or whatever the number of them, disagree with you, how is it possible for you to table a bill when you have discord among your own ranks?
Well, so that's one issue, but this is a decision for the Cabinet. The Cabinet took a very strong line you could see this happening, right? Dr. Mahathir, not known to be a man overly democratic, you know, he is the Prime Minister. If he signaled he wanted this, he could have made a deal of some sort. The other thing that it must be noted, this is a bill that is going to make the police force, as they say they want, to be a professional one, benchmarked against global standards, right? So what is the opposition? There are a lot of propaganda against the IPCMC. It's not constitutional. You know, it will not give natural justice to the police force. All of which have been answered over and over again.
Debunked, right? Debunked, yes.
Absolutely debunked. The question is, if a group of, say, let's put them developers who are corrupt and used to certain types of freedoms are now going to be regulated by a law, and they say, I'm going to go to every MP, you know, we are going to go to every MP that's in the parliament and lobby to prevent us from continuing our corrupt practices, would the political elite say, oh yes, of course, you can continue in your ways?
It's not a rhetorical question. It is. They said that. They're like,
Well,
yeah, oh, done. We heard
so
our voice.
precisely.
We heard our
what has
constituency. We're not
changed?
pushing this through.
Right. So
Nothing
the
has
question-
changed.
and that is the
They
fear.
can't be the majority.
Yeah.
So in terms of numbers, this is not the issue. So why are our political leaders afraid of the police force?
That's the right question. It's not about whether or not this is...
And that's the question we want you to consider tonight while we mull over other big news of the week. Sunday, 1st of December, we celebrated World AIDS Day 2019. Again, you know, looking at the numbers that were released this year, it turns out that 94% of HIV cases were transmitted through sexual relations last year. Millennials making the bulk of HIV cases. Most of the new HIV cases in Malaysia involve the age group between 20 to 29. I think these are really fascinating figures we need to peel back.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that the headlines do is they give you the new profile of people being infected, new infection rates, where they're coming from. All that is great, but actually the story isn't that. The story is really, why have there been improvements in certain sectors, right?
Yes.
Mother-child transmission largely disappeared. We now a case to be celebrated globally.
Yes.
The other thing, of course, is the reduction in terms of intravenous drug users. Now that another celebrated case where you see public policy, pragmatic, non-judgmental, you know, around the principle of harm reduction, doing so well. Question is, can it be applied, the same pragmatism be applied in other instances? So
To
you just look
sexually transmitted HIV cases.
absolutely. And what, in fact, we have had comments coming out of the ministry and so on and so forth, the MAC, the Malaysian AIDS Council, was we just don't have enough awareness of sexual reproductive rights and sex education in the schools. Why are we not having that?
You know, just like in the US when they say I have a black friend, in Malaysia I have a HIV positive friend. This individual has had a fulfilled life. This person has been on medication for over a decade. Life has been going on fantastic. But there is something about advocacy. This individual doesn't want to out himself or herself. This individual doesn't want to go out there and preach about awareness. So there is a sense of connect between people like us. I presume you're HIV negative, all three of us here, which we don't have a problem, you know, telling other people to raise awareness. But those that are afflicted with this disease might want to keep their mouth shut.
Well, I
Because of stigma.
I sincerely think that, you know, what you said, Sharaad, about the success of those programs should be replicated. You know, why is it that we can't replicate it with the kind of reproductive health awareness, with sexual sex education awareness? I mean, all these things actually go a long way in reducing 94% of HIV cases transmitted through sexual relations.
Yeah.
We should be looking at these figures, and I think.
But it's over a period of time,
yeah,
right? That
everybody-
94% reduction.
Last year. Oh, sorry, 94% of cases last year.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I think there's also a question, Melissa, of taking personal responsibility for our health, right? And this has to do with every adult who engages in sexual relations, right? And you can also tell, and this is a global story, of how people maybe in the early days of the HIV/AIDS epidemic were much more cautious. There's been maybe a drop-off in terms of being cautious. There new cultural forms that attach to people's sexual behavior, including drug use and so on, that might actually diminish their responsible behavior, we would like to put it that way. So there are all kinds of things in the mix. The question is, are we having those frank discussions about what's actually happening in the community? taking a non-judgmental approach to that, and then creating policies that will address them. I mean, it's just as simple as that. But you know, and so much in Malaysia happens around.
It's as simple and as difficult as that, isn't
Yeah,
it?
perhaps.
All right,
Okay.
we're going to be right back with more on Consider This. Don't go anywhere. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.